A new bill was just introduced to the US Senate that could have major implications for housing affordability and home prices across the country. The bill would restrict hedge funds and large institutional investors from purchasing single family homes anywhere in the nation. It would also force them to sell their current inventory of single family homes that they have. How will this affect home prices across the country? Will this make home prices come down? And what will this do to CPI? What will this do to rental inflation, which has increased steadily at around 0.4% month over month for at least the past year? We're going to talk about all of that in this video. But first, my name is Liam O'Reilly. I am a realtor with Jerry Riley Real Estate here in the state of Vermont. If you have any real estate needs in Vermont or anywhere across the country, all of my contact information is in the description, and I'd be happy to help you. So let's get right into this article here. It's by Fast and Company. Let me pull it up. So right here, a new bill proposes kicking Wall Street investors out of the U.S. housing market, but would it improve affordability? That is the question that this article is asking. And here's what the bill would do. The bill would require hedge funds to sell at least 10% of the total number of single family homes they currently own to families per year over a 10-year period. After a 10-year full phase out, all hedge funds would be completely banned from owning any single family homes. So this would also affect the build to rent model, right? We've seen neighborhoods pop up across the country over the past few years that have been built by these large institutional investors and rented out. So any building of single family homes would need to be built for sale and not build for rent. But, will this cause home prices to go down? What will this do to inflation? At the end of this article here, this person, Kevin Erdman, who has written a couple books about housing and the housing supply from 2008 up to today, this is what he says about it. As a result of regulatory tightening after 2008, we need millions of new homes, says Erdman. And this new bill would force builders to sell them piecemeal a few at a time. Rents are already undermining this country's economic fairness and capacity. I shudder to think of the potential ramifications of this travesty. If it passes, I cannot fathom a functional source of new housing that could stop the bleeding in American rent inflation. So pretty powerful words from this author, and what he's talking about with rent inflation can be seen right here in this chart. So here is CPI month over month. If you look at it, the blue line, those spikes, are the month over month changes in all items. The green line are all items except food and energy. So when the Federal Reserve talks about inflation, their preferred method of measuring inflation is the all items less food and energy. And the red line up there is the rent of primary residence. Now, there's some controversy with how this is calculated, the rent of primary residence. Um, the author of this, of Mish Talk, Mike Shedlock, he goes into that in depth in this article here. I'll leave this in the description. Once it loads, you'll see the title. As I scroll up, I'll leave it in the description. The curious claim that BLS is overstating rent and exaggerating inflation. That'll be in the description if you want to read it on your own. But he makes a pretty solid argument that it's actually a relatively accurate way to measure inflation. But regardless of whether you think it's accurate or not, it's the data that we have, and it's high. Rent has been increasing month over month. Of course, now with seasonality, as we've seen in the past and as we're seeing today, as we approach the winter months, this is a chart of the national rent price and then the CPI rent price. So the national rent price decreases in the winter months. It's very seasonal. It's tough to rent properties in the winter. I went through that in December this year here in Vermont with my rental property. It was very difficult finding a tenant. But the CPI, the rent of primary residence, accounts for that and seasonally adjusts, which is why the number is positive during these times. So despite seeing lower rents in the winter months, historically year over year, we have seen rent continue to increase. So when we talk about these investors who are purchasing these single family homes, how much of the single family home market are they purchasing, and how will this affect inventory? So I went over to CoreLogic, this article here that talks about the share of investors purchasing single family homes, and this is their most recent article from August of 2023. This is looking at quarter one and quarter two of this year, I do believe. So March 2023, investors accounted for 27% of all single-family homes purchased in the United States. So that's a substantial amount, 27% of all homes. But when we break it down and we take a look at who is purchasing these properties, and remember, this bill is for the hedge funds and the large institutional investors. Now, a lot of these companies, they own tens of thousands of properties. They own a lot of single family homes. So they're not small investors. They own a large portion of or they own many properties that they manage. So when we talk about investors and how many investors are purchasing homes, the share of those hedge funds that are actually purchasing that 27% of the single family housing stock, it's only about 10% of all investor purchases are these mega hedge fund corporations. Now, there's another 10% that's purchased by a medium size, or they call them large investors here, at CoreLogic, which is between 100 and 99 properties. But this bill, at least my understanding of this bill, I'm not 100% sure that this will stop those large investors, the 100 to 99, 999 property owners. I think they're mainly targeting the largest property owners across the country that own over 1,000 homes nationwide. So, even if they are talking about the large and the mega, that's accounting for about 20% of home purchases, this year. So we're looking at roughly, if investor purchases accounted for 27% of the market, and then 20% of those purchases were these mega corporations and these large corporations, these large landlords, then we're talking about 5.5% of the rental inventory that would be taken away from these investors and put into the hands of single family home owners. And that is a good number. That's very substantial, 5%. But I don't know if it's enough inventory to sway to push the needle in one direction. And something that we really have to consider with this bill is that it's not going to affect all markets equally. Now, these large corporations um that own a lot of homes across the country, they don't buy it evenly across the entire country. A lot of these rural areas, they don't own any homes. I know here in Vermont, I don't know of any hedge fund that owns multiple single family homes across Vermont. I doubt, that maybe there's a landlord with 100 single family homes that they rent out, but most of the landlords around the area around Vermont own multifamily property. There are single family rentals, but there's not a massive corporation or massive companies that are purchasing single family homes and renting them out, at least here in Vermont. But in other cities, they're very prevalent, like Atlanta, for example. When we look here, so Invitation Homes, they own more than 80,000 single family rental properties nationally. These are the companies that they're targeting. These massive landlords. Homes for Rent own about 50,000 properties nationally. And if we look at the Atlanta data, um, which is, let me just pull it up real quick, which is here, the so these charts right here are investors in the Atlanta area, and um, this is how many homes they own around Atlanta by corporation. So American Homes for Rent, the company that has a portfolio of 50,000 homes, they own about 5,000 homes around Atlanta. Tricon Homes owns 5,000 homes. And then we go all the way down to Invitation Homes. They own 11,000 homes, and then everyone else owns 27,000. So altogether, those large corporations own about 40,000 homes in Atlanta alone. So in cities like Atlanta, and in this article here, they mention some of the big cities, Atlanta, Phoenix, Tampa, Charlotte, um, Dallas, Chicago, Las Vegas, Orlando. Those cities will be most affected by this bill if it comes into action, because that's where the investors are. They're not spread out evenly. If you're in a smaller city like Burlington, Vermont, or even, I'm from New Hampshire. I doubt there's many massive single family home institutional owners in like Manchester, for instance. So not every city is going to be affected equally, but this will help affordability in those cities, at least affordability to purchase homes. Now, what happens to the tenants who are essentially evicted because their landlord is forced to sell to a homeowner? Now, a portion of those tenants will hopefully be able to purchase that home from the landlord, depending on if this flood of inventory or if the flood of selling brings a lot of inventory to markets like Atlanta, we could see home prices come down, which would make things more affordable and more tenants would be able to buy. But as things stand right now, housing is not very affordable. So many of these renters can't afford to purchase a home. And at least some portion of the people that are renting in Atlanta from these large corporations won't be able to buy a home, which could cause CPI and rental inflation to continue to increase around these areas. So this is really a nuanced topic. There's not necessarily a right side or a wrong side to go. I think some of these stories about these large landlords are horrific, and I'll leave the article in the description that talks about firsthand accounts around Atlanta. And if you guys read it, it's really sad what some people have gone through with these large institutional buyers. But I think there's ramifications with CPI and rent um, that could have unintended consequences from this bill. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.